Howdy folks, and welcome to Celebration Earth, the Houston Museum of Natural Science's month-long celebration of all things Earth. Each week here on YouTube, museum educators will take you through some of our grandest earthbound exhibitions. You can make a difference at HMNS with a donation to our annual fund, which supports world-class exhibitions and captivating programming for the Houston community year-round. Your gift can spark a lifelong appreciation of our natural world in all of our visitors, both in person and online. Make an impact today.
This unique species behind me was only discovered about 120 years ago. Although it's well known for its zebra-striped legs, it's much more closely related to the giraffe, and it's actually its only known living relative to the giraffe. Interestingly enough, it's known by the name of a forest giraffe or a Congolese giraffe, but we best know it as the okapi. Now, these okapi are super interesting. They have a prehensile tail, which means it's really good at wrapping around branches and pulling off leaves, just like a giraffe. They have these males have these ossicles or horns on their head, like you can see in this male species behind me. They leave behind sticky and stinky footprints as a way to communicate with other okapi and indicate their territory, because they're very solitary creatures, and most of them don't grow up in a grouping. They also make only very low sounds that are impossible for humans to hear. So you may notice that they're very good at being sneaky, which is why they were only discovered about 120 years ago. Now, these forest giraffe are fascinating, but they also serve another important role in this environment. They are known as an umbrella species, which sounds really unusual, but they basically become a poster child for conservation in the area. This means that a lot of conservation decisions are made around this animal, but in turn, by protecting the environment that this animal is found in, it also protects all of the plants and other animals and wildlife found in that area as well. As an umbrella species, the okapi actually serve to protect the area where they're found. They're found in the Ituri forest, which is found in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And in 1992, they set aside about 1/5 of the land as the Okapi Wildlife Reserve. By doing this, they protect a portion of the okapi's habitat, but they also protect about 1,500 other species that can be found there, like forest buffalo, forest elephants, chimpanzees, leopards, all sorts of plants and animals as well. In addition to protecting animals, they also protect some indigenous people there, like the Efe and Mbuti people, who find this forest home and they live in traditional hunter-gatherer roles. This is part of their unique habitat, and they still use it to survive today. So looking at umbrella species like the okapi, a lot of decisions are made about them, but they serve to protect a whole lot more of the environment as well.
The oryx is a giant antelope. Now, they're particularly well adapted to being in desert environments. In Africa, there are several different species of oryx, but most of them live in dry, arid climates, and they also eat seasonal grasses. When grasses aren't available, they can forage on other smaller things, but they're not dependent upon water, which is what gives them their advantage. When they are traveling through the desert, if they need water, they can dig up to 1 meter deep, about more than a yard deep, and they can create pools of water from underneath the sand. So really the water travels with them. Now, because of this particular adaptation, they have oryx in a couple different places across Africa, including the Kalahari Desert. This particular species that lives there is called a Gemsbok, or an Arabian oryx. And that particular species of oryx was actually introduced into the United States. Why? Let's find out. Between 1960 and 1969, there was a pretty big search on to figure out what species of large game could be introduced into White Sands, New Mexico, without causing a lot of environmental damage to the surrounding areas. They ended up going with the Gemsbok, or this Arabian oryx, because it would be adapted well for that environment, and it wouldn't really be able to travel much beyond that. And so, due to federal law, they brought over an experimental population and they raised them on an experimental ranch. And then over the next 6 years, 95 individuals were released onto the White Sands Missile Range. Those 95 individuals today end up being 1,000 individuals. They don't actually have any natural predators in the United States. There are no lions to get them. There are no large species of jaguars that are hunting them. So they've actually thrived here. What they eat while they're here is grasses like they would eat in Africa, but they also eat things like yucca that grow naturally. And because they have plenty of food, and because they have no natural large predators, they have ended up populating this area quite extensively. So this is an example of an introduced invasive species. When you have introduced a species, it doesn't always go well. So, for example, fire ants were introduced accidentally into the United States, and they cause all sorts of damage to both land, to environments, to biomes, and to animals when they're trying to grow and reproduce. And they also hurt your feet. An introduced species that was intentional is the Russian boar. Those were introduced into the United States for hunting, and today, just in Texas alone, they do millions of dollars worth of damage to property and to livestock. Now, why were the Gemsboks introduced into New Mexico? For hunting. Basically, that area didn't have any really large, big game that would entice hunters to come to New Mexico to hunt. So they wanted to have something that would be sort of an exotic species that would draw hunters to the area. Now, this seems counterintuitive, but this is actually pretty smart when you think about conservation. If you look at just white-tailed deer alone, about $15 billion is raised every year for parks and for fish and game and conservation efforts. That money that comes from hunting licenses is directly put back into the parks that you go camp in and go visit with your family. So once a species like this is introduced, the only way to control it is usually through hunting, which raises money for conservation efforts in your national and local parks. But if you look at the white-tailed deer, which is a species that we have in Texas, it's a species we have all over the United States, it's natural, but we still hunt it. Why? Well, it's part of conservation efforts to keep the populations and those herds under control and to keep them healthy. So what ends up happening is if you have too many of those animals, they will end up starving because there's not enough food. And part of that is we're to blame because we have taken away some of their natural habitat. But sometimes there's a year where there's a drought, or like this year where we had a freeze. And if we don't cull the population back, then some individuals will die in less than ideal ways. So you cull the population so you keep it sort of regulated and make sure that individuals in the population are healthy. Plus, like I said, those funds that come from hunting licenses end up going back to your parks to make sure that you enjoy the park when you go there, and they also make sure that they take care of those animals inside the parks as well.
Often when I think of discovering new species, I think of someone traversing the wild frontier, climbing over mountains, through forests, stumbling upon an animal and going, aha, a new species. But it's not quite adventurous as that. It's actually way more meticulous. Here, we actually have an example of a newly discovered species discovered by Dr. Dan Brooks, HMNS Curator of Vertebrate Zoology, and Dr. John Bickham. And the story goes like this. In 2009, Robert G. Trujillo discovered through DNA sequencing that there were some branches that were formerly unknown by the genus Scotophilus, which basically translates to there were probably more distinctions and different species found in this bigger umbrella of a group. These African house bats had a lot more distinctions between them. So Dr. Dan Brooks and Dr. Bickham jumped on in and started doing meticulous measuring of animal specimen to figure out what those differences are. They took and measured tiny skulls, the size of the bat, the size of all sorts of dimensions of this very small species, and they ended up finding that there were 4 distinct species within Scotophilus. Now, I don't know if you all know this, but if you discover a species, you get a role in naming that species. So they named one of them after Dr. Trujillo, but they also named one after an HMNS connection. This species, Scotophilus andrewrobori, was named in honor of Andrew Robori, longtime friend and family member of HMNS collection staff. These discoveries were made possible by museum collections. Museums all across the United States allowed Dr. Brooks and Dr. Bickham to come in and measure and examine these specimens, which led to this new discovery. So although museums aren't going to be on the forefront of your mind of new species discovery, this meticulous behind-the-scene work can actually discover thousands of new species, which leads to conservation efforts and protection of them as well.
If you're in the Middle East or in Northern Africa, you might find a rock hyrax. They look like rodents, but they're not, and they're kind of weird little creatures. First off, they have a hard time regulating their body temperature, so they will actually come out and sunbathe for as long as they can. They can spend up to 95% of the day just laying around in the sun, using the body heat, or the heat that's produced by the sun to warm their bodies so that they can help digest. Now, also, their digestion is super weird. They actually have a 3-chambered stomach, and they eat things that are really hard to digest, things that are woody and tuberous. And so they have special symbiotic gut bacteria that helps them break that down. But they're not born with that gut bacteria. Where do they get it from? As babies, they eat their parents' poop to make sure that they introduce it into their system. That's weird. Now, also, one of my favorite things about the rock hyrax is that it is related to something else in the African Hall, but you probably would never guess what it is. This guy, its closest relative, is actually the elephant. Its second closest relative is in the Sirenia family, so that's dugongs and manatees. What's happening here? So back in the day, they basically had a common ancestor, and then from that common ancestor, you ended up having rock hyraxes, elephants, and manatees, and dugongs. So in the Eocene epoch, so that's 50 to 30 million years ago, there were many species of these things. Some of them were as little as a mouse, and some of them were as big as a horse. But now today, there are only 4 species left, and they're all about the same size. So how do we know that they're related to elephants? So they've got 4 distinct features that help direct you in the taxonomic line to know that they're related. And 2 of them are obvious, and you can actually see them if you look at the specimen. The first one is its teeth. So most animals, if you look at them, you'll see fangs, like on the lion, but the fangs are actually these canine teeth off to the side. Elephants actually have modified teeth that turn into tusks, and they're incisors. The hyrax also has tiny little tusks, but they're made from the incisors rather than the canines. And then if you look at them up close, you can see them sticking out. Another feature they have in common with elephants is hoof-like toenails. Most animals have claws at the end of their digits, their phalanges, but these guys actually have the same little hoof-like toes that are on an elephant. So when you compare the two, one's furry, one's not, but you can see the similarities. Now, 2 other fun facts about the hyrax is they have sweat glands on their feet. It's really one of the only places that they can keep cool, and their little pads on their feet are rubbery. But that actually helps them because the little bit of moisture on those rubbery pads helps them with traction as they're scaling up rocks and scampering around trying to avoid getting eaten by one of the many predators in Africa that find them to be delicious. They also, if you look at the back of their fur, they have a little ridge that runs along there, and it has scent glands that they use for marking territory. Well, not everybody's going to be able to make it to Africa. You can make it to the museum. So when you come to the museum, we like to have things like this on display so that you too can learn about these connections in science.
This unique bird behind me is known by a really unusual name. It's called the undertaker bird. Now you may be wondering, why would you call a bird an undertaker? Well, it's got several unique features. One, this bird has a bald, scabby head, which usually makes people seem a little bit less excited about the beauty of it. It also has black plumage, and it's known for eating a lot of what we would consider to be gross stuff. All of that combines together to form our marabou stork. So the marabou stork, although not pretty, serves a huge role in the environment. It's part of a food web, and it serves as a scavenger portion of that food web, which means it's going to eat rotting flesh, dead animals, feces, all of that rotting and rancid stuff that we would never go near, this animal helps take care of. In your food web, you often have producers that produce the food, like our plants. You have consumers that eat the producers, and then consumers that eat other consumers. And the problem comes is when a consumer dies, what happens to those remains? And this is where our decomposers and scavengers come in. So the marabou stork is going to come in, eat that leftover animal, and in fact, it uses its large bill to help other scavengers eat as well. Another unique relationship that comes from the marabou stork is a relationship of commensalism. Basically, when the marabou stork opens up a dead animal and eats what it can, it leaves this behind. It leaves this rest of the flesh behind. And a bee in that area comes in and lays its eggs and thrives through that process. So remember, in a commensalist relationship, a marabou stork has really no influence on that relationship at all. It doesn't benefit nor get harmed, but the bee thrives because of this relationship with the stork. Although the marabou stork isn't the prettiest bird, it serves a really important role in our environment. So remember, even ugly birds can be important too.
In symbiosis, there can be three different kinds of relationship: mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. Now, a mutualistic relationship is where both animals benefit. Commensal relationship is where one animal benefits and the other one is not harmed or possibly even aware of what's happening. And a parasitic relationship is where one animal definitely benefits, but the other animal is definitely harmed. I've got two examples for you today, and one actually involves this crocodile. This crocodile, a Nile crocodile, lives in northern Africa and along the Nile River. There's a bird called the Egyptian plover that actually comes in and hops into the mouth of the crocodile. You'd think that the crocodile might want to eat that bird, but they've sort of developed a relationship, so everybody benefits. When a crocodile eats something big, like an antelope or some other crocodile, they might get bits stuck in their teeth, and they can't really brush their teeth like you can. And if that gunk stays in their teeth, that meat, it may rot and it may cause a tooth infection. So when sunbathing and the crocodile would like something picked out of his teeth, he opens his mouth wide and just sort of relaxes, and these little plovers hop in their mouths and pick out the meat between the teeth. The meat actually feeds the plover, so it benefits, and it helps clean the crocodile's teeth, so it benefits as well. Now let's look at another example behind me. So right behind me we have this fella called a kudu, but that's not who we're interested in. We're interested in this little bird right here called the oxpecker. Oxpeckers feed exclusively off the backs of larger animals like the kudu, antelope, rhinos, elephants, and what they do is an example of mutualism. So this little guy will sit on the kudu's back and he'll wait for bugs to land on there or flies to land on there, and he will snatch up those bugs and he will eat them. They pick off ticks, they keep them clean, and for animals like the kudu, who's actually related to a cow rather than a deer, it's really important because sometimes those animals can actually spread disease. If those kudu come in contact with local populations of cows, they might cross diseases between the two of them. So the oxpecker is keeping the populations healthy, and he's keeping the kudu parasite free. Now, some scientists would argue that the oxpecker is actually a parasite because they've been observed to wait until the ticks that they want to pick off are particularly ripe and plump and juicy and then eat them. So delaying gratification a little bit to get a juicier meal. But either way, they're still keeping the parasites off the animal. Now, the oxpecker actually has a different relationship with a different animal that's mutually beneficial as well. So we already talked about how the oxpecker will sit on top of larger animals and pick off the parasites. But larger animals benefit from more than just the grooming. In Swahili, oxpecker actually translates to rhino's guard. So theoretically, they should sit on top of rhinos and help alert them to what's going on in their environment. So as a conservation effort, scientists wanted to see if this was actually a thing that was going to help or not. So they took a population of rhinos and they kept track of them. And the scientists would sneak up on the rhino and they would see how close that they could get before the rhino was alerted to their presence. And for most rhinos, it was about 1 out of 5 where they noticed the human before it was in its range or territory. Then they took a group of oxpeckers and they released them and let them land on the rhinos, and then they tried the same experiment again. 5 out of 5 rhinos would notice that the human was sneaking up on them before they got into their range. The sound that the oxpecker makes is specific and distinct to when humans are present. So oxpeckers are actually helping with conservation also because they can help rhinos be alerted to their surroundings.
Thanks for watching. Remember to check out the links in the description to learn more about our Earth and to see how you can donate to HMNS.